Hello, my name is Anna and I'm a technical consultant with KPMG Crimson Wing. Today I'm going to talk to you about data management in Dynamics 365 for finance and operations solutions. For simplicity, I'm going to refer to Dynamics 365 for finance and operation as Dynamics. So today I'm going to talk about the types and categories of data, how to move data between Dynamics environments, data entities, data management workspace, and in the second part of the video I will talk about the data management process throughout the implementation of a Dynamics solution. Let's see what are the main data types in Dynamics. The parameters are mandatory settings to set up a module, for example HR parameters or HR shared parameters. Reference data is usually simple and of small quantity, such as customer groups and tax codes. Master data, usually complex and of large quantity, for example, employees, jobs, and positions. And finally, transactional data, which is the operational data of a business, such as invoices and purchase orders. Parameters are usually set up by the delivery team, while reference, master, and transactional data is usually provided by the customer. Another way to categorize the data is to look at whether they are static or dynamic. Static data, once set up in a solution, will not change anymore, as opposed to dynamic data, which does change. For example, employees leave and join the company. All parameter data and a large amount of reference data is static, while a small amount of reference data and all master and transactional data is dynamic. Let's see how we can move data between Dynamics environments. The main mechanism is to export and import data using data entities and the data management workspace. Another option to move data is through a database backup and restore. Today I'm going to focus on the first option. Let's see what is a data entity. A data entity encapsulates a business concept and is an abstraction from the physical implementation of database tables. For example, workers. A worker is a business concept, and in the worker data entity you can find various information on the worker, for example, name, personal number, primary contact details, as well as address. All this data is stored in different tables in the database. But when you use the entity, you don't need to know how this data is stored in the database. The import process, or the import and export process both, have 3 stages. Let's see how the import process goes. First, the source files, which can be CSV, Excel, or XML. These files are imported into a blob storage. From the blob storage, these files are parsed by the data management service, and the result of the parsing is then stored in a storage table. Storage tables provide intermediary storage during file parsing, transformations, and validations. From the staging table, the data is then copied to the target table through the data entity. And on the data entity, you can have more business logic and more validations. Now I will open up the data management workspace. You can see it on the screen. It has 3 main areas. The first areas are tiles, and these tiles give me easy access to the data management tools. In the middle, I can view all my import and export projects, and then in the third area, I can view the history of my exports and imports. If I click on the data entities tile, I can see a list of all the available data entities in Dynamics. I will search for a specific one called jobs. And here for the jobs data entity, I can see the name of the staging table and the name of the target entity. If I want to see the fields of this entity, I click on target fields, which will list me all the fields, including description, effective, expiration date, or job ID and job type. I will now go back to the dashboard to create an export project. I click on the export tile, and I name my project export jobs. I specify that I want to do the export into an Excel file and that the name of the data entity is jobs. I add the data entity to the project, and in this link here, view map, I can view the automatic mapping of the fields between my source file, my Excel file, and the data entity. This automatic mapping is done based on the name of the fields. If I want, I can select the mapping and delete it. Say I'm not interested at all in the market prices, so I'm going to delete all these mappings. Once I do that, I save the new mapping, close this, and I can export the project by clicking on the export menu item. So now it notifies me that the data export job is scheduled and that I have to refresh the form to view the current status. I close this, I am immediately notified that the job has successfully completed. I refresh the form, and indeed I can see that the job status is succeeded, and I can see that 99 records were exported. I can download the file. Downloaded the Excel file. I'm opening it now. I will enable editing, and I can view all the fields and values that I have exported for jobs. Now I'm going to show you how to import a new job, and for this what I'm going to do is I'm going to delete all these jobs here but one, and I'm going to modify a few fields. I'm going to give a new job ID, say test job, and maybe I'm just going to modify the description of it, say test description. That should do it. I'll save it and go back to the dashboard. I'm going to click on import tile to create a new import project. I'm going to call it import jobs, and I have to specify that I'm importing from an Excel file. The name of the entity is jobs again, and upload. I'm going to upload this file. This is the one that I have just modified. The tile is created with the jobs, and I can view the mapping. You can see the mapping was created automatically, and the mapping for the field market price was not done because these fields were not in my Excel file. In the mapping details tab, I see again the mapping, but in a different display. Here I have two extra options. I have the option to auto-generate and to auto-default the field. I can select auto-generate for fields that are generated using number sequences. And in this case, I will select auto-default for my effective date field. Once I select auto-default, I have the option to specify a default value, and I will specify this to be 2016, 1st of January, just as an example. Click OK. I save my modifications, and now go back to my project, and I can import the job. Click on the import tile. Import job is scheduled. I'm already notified. I refresh the form, and I can see that the status of the job is succeeded. I can view the staging data. Here I can see the values that I have just imported, and I can see that the transfer status of this record is completed. Next, I will show you what kind of validations are performed when I import data, and where can I check the errors in case this validation is not successful. I'll go back to my file, and before this data is even imported into a staging table, the unique constraints, the mandatory constraints are checked, and also it is checked that all my values are in the correct format. So for example, if I'm importing two jobs that have the same job ID, let's say I want to import this file which contains two jobs with the same job ID. Let's save it and import it, and let's see what happens. going to write in the job name again and upload the file. This is the one I've just modified. Dynamics asks me whether I want to overwrite the existing file, and yes, I do want to overwrite it. And it also asks me whether I want to regenerate the mapping, and I don't want to regenerate the mapping because I defined the default value there and I would like it to stay there. So I say no to this. I'll import and refresh the form, and I can see that the status of the execution is now failed. If I go to the view staging data, I see that there is nothing in my staging table. The records did not make it to my staging table. To view the error, I can go to the view execution log, and here I have a log text, and this text tells me that the file contains duplicate rows, cannot insert data into staging due to unique key violations. If I go back to my file and I delete the second job, so now I have one job with one unique job ID. I could trigger some other errors if, for example, in the expiration field, which is a date, I write in something, a string, which is not in the correct format. Then again, I would get an error. Or if I don't give a job ID at all, and job ID is a mandatory field, then again, I will get an error. So now, let's import this record into the staging table and see what are the validations that happen in the staging table. This last field here, the title ID, this references data in the title table. So this account manager title is already existing in the Dynamics. And I will write one title here that I'm sure that doesn't exist, says test title. I'm going to save it, and let's see what happens if I import this file. I'll go back to my import project, write in jobs again, and upload the jobs file. Yes, I want to overwrite the file, and no, I don't want to regenerate the mapping. Let's import. I'm going to refresh the form. Again, execution status has failed, but now if I go into the staging data, I can see that my record is indeed in the staging table, but the transfer status is error. What is the error? The value test title in field title is not found in the related table titles. Now I have two options here to correct this. I either go to the titles form and write in test title so that it exists in the system, or I edit the staging table right here, and in the title field I choose something else. I choose something that already exists. For example, transport coordinator. I save this change, and I can say copy data to target. Here it gives me the option to run for all or to run for a criteria, and I can select run it for rows with previous errors, and let's do that. Let's click OK, and this is just the summaries page of the execution. Here I still have to click on run in order to run the process. This runs really quickly, and I can see that the transfer status of the job is now completed. So as you can see, it is actually really important, the sequence in which you import the data. In this case, for example, the title should have been there before I import the jobs. So I go back to my import project. Let me try to import titles. I already have a file for the titles data entity, and this file only contains one title, which is the test title. I upload it, and the second tile is created for me, but as you can see, they're in the wrong order. It's jobs first and titles then, and I need it the other way around. So I can go to this entity sequence menu item, And in this dialog, I can specify the sequence of the imports. Within each project, I can have multiple execution units, and within execution units, I can have multiple levels. And within levels, I can finally sequence the import of the data entities. So I will set jobs to level 2 update, and I want to set title to be imported first and update. I can do this manually, but I can also select auto sequence, in which case Dynamics will automatically give me the correct sequence of the import. I close this, and you see the tiles have switched places. First is the titles, data entity, and then is the jobs. Let's import this. Refresh the page. Both records are went in the target table, and if I view the staging data, you can see the test title has been imported. And if I view the jobs staging data, you can see that the status is incompleted. And this is the job that I imported in the previous run. And with this run, what happened is that the title field of this job has been updated to test title. So next, I will talk to you about the data management process throughout the implementation of a Dynamics solution. A Dynamics solution implementation has the following main phases: the agile preparation, agile execution, user acceptance test, deployment, and operation. At KPMG, we use an agile methodology, which means that our execution phase is comprised by several iterations, and each iteration goes through specific stages. The data migration is an integral part of the solution, and it is really important that we consider data migration in every phase of the implementation. Let's start with agile preparation. During this phase, we already know what is the module that we are implementing. So we already know which are the data entities that we need to implement the solution. And a large amount of these data entities we know sure that we will need. For example, if it's an HR solution, we know for sure that we are going to have employees, jobs, and positions. This means that we can already provide a list of data entities to the customer so that the customer can start identifying the source of the data. At KPMG, we have spreadsheets that lists the data entities and lists the fields of the data entities, together with information such as which field is mandatory, what is the format of the field, and we also give an example for the field. It is also very important that we specify that this list of data entities will change and will evolve during the execution phase. The data strategy is also something very important that we have to talk about in the preparation phase. It is important to define what are the client responsibilities and what are the delivery team responsibilities. For example, we have projects where the data migration and the test data migration runs are owned by the delivery team, but we also have projects where the client team owns the data migration and the test data migration process, and we are there only to train and support the client data team. In the agile execution phase, this is comprised by multiple iterations, and in each iteration we design, implement, and test a specific prioritized list of user stories. At the end of the sprint, the solution increment is released to the client, played back to the client, and released to the client, and the client's feedback is then incorporated into subsequent sprints. During each sprint, we have a list of user stories, and it is very important that we analyze the data need of the user stories and document the data need of the user stories. It doesn't matter what type of data it is, whether it's parameter, reference, master, or transactional data. We need a data entity so that we can move this data from one environment to another. So you can see here the release solution increment to client is highlighted because this is an example scenario of a case where we need the data entity to move data from the environment where the delivery team is working and onto the environment where the customer will test. So the initial list of data entities will evolve sprint by sprint. New data entities and fields will be removed and new ones are going to be added. At the end of the execution, we are going to have, besides the solution of course, we are going to have a SQL staging database and a master configuration environment. The SQL staging database will contain tables for every data entity which is in scope, and also will contain the relationships between these tables. At the end of every iteration, the delivery team is going to provide SQL scripts to build up these tables. And the customer will have the responsibility to identify the source of the data. The customer, together with the delivery team, they are going to collaborate to define repeatable and automatic scripts to cleanse the data and to transform the data into a format that is expected by Dynamics. The goal of this database is to ensure integrity of the data, including referential integrity. The master configuration database also evolves during the sprints and the iterations. So the master configuration database will contain all static data. It will contain parameters and a large amount of reference data. And the goal of this environment is that when we create new environments, we can initialize these new environments quickly through a database backup and restore. Thus, static data is going to be moved from one environment to another using database backup, restore, and the master configuration environment, while dynamic data is going to be imported through data entities and the data management framework. In the next phases, which is user acceptance and deployment phase, multiple test data migrations are going to be performed. We have to perform as many test data migrations to ensure a smooth data migration during the cutover window to the production environment. Each test data migration should contain the full end-to-end process. And this is extract data from the legacy system, cleanse and transform the data as needed as it gets imported into the SQL staging database. And on the database itself, you can do more cleansing and more transformations. Then extract the data from the staging database into CSV files or Excel or XML files, and then import these files into Dynamics. This was a short introduction into data entities, the data management workspace, and on how to manage data throughout the implementation of a dynamic solution. For more questions, please don't hesitate to contact me or to comment on the video.